Welcome, or RIS, and welcome to another review. In recent years, we've been fortunate enough to see a resurgence in heritage lines and reinterpretations of vintage timepieces. And it's no secret that this particular timepiece is an extremely popular offering from Tissot. It draws inspiration from a time gone by, but has become one of the biggest influences in the modern watch world. This is the Tissot PRX. Here are the dimensions and specs. The PRX has a case diameter of 40mm, an outer lug width of 28mm with an inner lug width of 12mm, a lug to lug of 44.6mm. However, the first link lacks articulation, extending the lug to 51mm on the bracelet. It has a thickness of 10.9mm, a water resistance of 100 meters with a push-pull crown, and 80 hours of power reserve thanks to the Powermatic 80. Take one look at the dial and the show has already begun. We are immediately greeted with a vibrant sunburst of colour which spans across a textured plane of squares and channels. These elements work together to break up the colour of the dial, offering the many shades of the one colour to come through, maximising a single palette through depth. The raised squares also add interest to an otherwise flat canvas and gives it a geometric aesthetic, tying in well with the case and bracelet. The hands continue the boxy theme with a rectangular structure and blunt tips. They feature polished flanks with brushing running down the center and do a fantastic job at capturing light. Just like the hands, the indices share a similar rectangular design with polishing and brushing, this time with flat tips. This specific dial, Ice Blue, does an excellent job at retaining its light shade of blue even in darker settings. Even in low light situations, the sunburst finish and subtle shifting shades can still be seen. Lume can be found on the hour and minute hands as well as the indices. However, its application feels more like an aesthetic choice than a functional one. The Lume on the hour and minute hands gets the job done. It's not bright by any means, but it is there. The Lume on the indices is a whole different story. When looking at the indices, I sometimes forget Lume is even there. It's a very thin strip on some very thin markers, consequently creating a very faint glow, and by faint I mean almost non-existent. Now keep in mind, before these Lume shots, I soaked the watch in the sun for about an hour, and these were the results. I feel like Tissot added Lume to the indices to try and create a cohesive link with the hands, and that was it. The case on the PRX is what really makes the watch shine. It's predominantly brushed with a polished bezel and polished bevel on the side edge, with many facets, straight lines, and steep slopes at 12 and 6 o'clock. These sharp transitions give the case a squared off look while maintaining a familiar circular shape, forming a link with the square pattern on a circular dial. A side profile shot of the case will also show a slight curve on the underside of the lugs, while the steep angle at the top of the lugs helps it wrap around the wrist. We also get a display case back to look at the Powermatic 80 movement. Now, it's not the prettiest out there, but it's still quite nice to look at, even if most of the decorating is found on that rotor. To start the ticking, we can manually wind the watch, but it's not the most enjoyable experience. While the small crown plays into its vintage aesthetic, it can be a pain to grip and it can feel quite dainty when winding. Not only that, the movement can be quite stiff to wind, which makes it even harder with a smaller crown. The real magic happens when the bracelet comes into play. Here, we get an integrated design with the bracelet slotting into the narrow inner lug sections via a toolless quick change system. The bracelet creates a seamless flow from the case to the bracelet, something you expect from an integrated watch, yet something often done quite poorly among many watch brands. Fortunately, the PRX does the job well. The bracelet looks and feels like an extension of the case instead of an addition. It's constructed in a similar way to the case, predominantly brushed with polished bevels. Its flat links match the flat nature of the case and works in tandem to catch light as a single unit. The many facets and transitioning angles attract light extremely well, giving the whole watch a flashy appearance despite its brushed finish. Now, being an integrated bracelet, it will begin at the outer width of the lugs. While presenting a very pleasing and unified appearance, it can look and feel bulky when on the wrist. To alleviate this, the bracelet incorporates a dramatic taper, which works to emphasize its overall shape and creates a comfortable wearing experience. It also demonstrates a sleek aesthetic, further enhanced by the use of a butterfly to point clasp to keep the bracelet nice and slim. Now let's get it on the wrist. For your reference, I have a 6.5 inch wrist, and this is the 40mm PRX. Now, despite its boxy and sharp appearance, the watch feels very comfortable on the wrist. Do keep in mind though, the joining end links, so this one here, will protrude from the case, extending the lug to lug, which can cause wrapping and overhang issues on smaller wrists. Overall, the Tissot PRX is a top contender in the watch world. It's an excellent example of an integrated bracelet done right, while also being positioned at an enticing price point. The watch honestly looks more expensive than it is, but is priced appropriately for the package presented. It's offered in a variety of colors to suit one's taste and does an exceptionally good job at showing off their many shades. There's obvious room for improvement for the PRX, but there's not an obvious alternative to the watch. It has a textured dial, an integrated bracelet, heritage to back it up, and it's ultimately a crowd favorite. It's a good watch. Thank you for checking out the video. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more watch content. I'll see you in the next one.